Back in the 90s and the early 21st century, mascot platformers were a great way of showing off what your new console was capable of. The N64 Super Mario 64 proved that 3D gaming was truly the future, while the sheer speed and smoothness of Sonic the Hedgehog on the Mega Drive was unlike anything else seen before it. There was also Bonk. Sony's flagship platformer for its first PlayStation console was the Crash Bandicoot series, a series whose original trilogy was such a success that it garnered enough nostalgia to facilitate a full remake back in 2017. Personally, these were some of my favourite games on the PS1, and I fondly remember getting 105% on Warped, 100% on 2, and using that massive password to pretend I'd got 100% on Crash 1. Although I feel that getting the platinum on the remake version has somewhat corrected this aberration. So upon hearing of the release of the Wrath of Cortex, the fourth Crash platformer and first for PS2 in 2001, 12-year-old me was incredibly excited for all the possibilities that a next-generation Crash game could bring. Part of the reason the first Crash trilogy was so well received was the number of changes each subsequent game brought. Crash 2 dispensed with the original's linearity and added a warp room structure and unlockable powers, while the third game added Crash's sister Coco as a playable character and some post-game content with its time trials. So, what was new in the first next-gen Crash Bandicoot game? The short answer is not a lot, and the long answer is also not a lot, just explained over this next paragraph. The 5 levels then boss structure from Crash 2 is still in effect, the time trials are here unchanged, and the power-ups, bar the first one, are exactly the same and are unlocked in the exact same order as in Warped. So graphics aside, ostensibly there are no discernible improvements here, but dig a little deeper and you'll see that there are still no discernible improvements here. The holograms still chat to Crash in the warp room like they did in 2, disembodied heads still talk trash before levels like they did in Warped, and of course there are a fair few levels in which you're running away from something into the camera. In fact, any slight changes made to the formula are often to the detriment of the game. In Warped, most of the vehicle levels were frustrating and cumbersome, so naturally Wrath of Cortex does nothing to change this and instead adds more of them. Planes, jeeps, spaceships and robot suits, all incredibly cool sounding modes of transport rendered immensely boring by the game's controls and level design. Although special mention must be made to the level where you have to destroy ships shaped like a giant Cortex face. The only additions that could be considered even remotely positive are the atmosphere levels, which invoke memories of Marble Madness, only with a lot more speed. As well as the multiple modes of vehicular mayhem, the back of the box also boasts about Coco being fully playable for the first time ever. But her levels just feel like normal Crash stages hamstrung by the fact you can't use any of Crash's powers, and Coco doesn't even have any of her own, unless you count the world's worst sweep kick. But to be honest, the manifold similarities, mind-numbing additions, and these weird trees pale in comparison to what I remember most about Wrath of Cortex, the load times. Although they don't really occur anywhere that you wouldn't expect them to be, the sheer length of them on the PS2 version is ridiculous, sometimes lasting for over 30 seconds at a time. There's no interest in them either, it's just Crash or Coco floating around with annoying sound effects in the background, or sometimes not even that. Thankfully, the Xbox version cuts these down significantly. Now you could definitely argue that if it ain't broke then why fix it, and the lack of critical success for future titles which did stray from the traditional Crash formula certainly strengthens such an argument. But to me, Wrath of Cortex represents a huge missed opportunity. Look at how the Mario series has evolved every time it debuted on a new system. Look at what Sonic Adventure did 2 years before Wrath of Cortex. Of course, the changes in developer and publisher are huge factors in why Wrath of Cortex is what it is. Barely a month after the game's release, original Crash developer Naughty Dog brought out Jak and Daxter The Precursor Legacy, a game with tons more character, charm, and ambition than Wrath of Cortex. So maybe this is what a PS2 Crash platformer would have been like had they stayed. Or maybe it was a conscious decision to keep Wrath of Cortex as close to Warped as possible so that suckers would look at screenshots in a magazine, ignore the change of developer, and buy it ASAP. Because that is exactly what I did. If you do wish to play Wrath of Cortex, then it's not particularly hard to find or expensive to buy. However, you can't play it on any current consoles and it's not worth digging a legacy system out for. But if you do have the option, please, for your sanity's sake, play it on an Xbox or 360, as it's the only version where the load times are anything other than utterly intolerable. Despite its glaring flaws and lack of ambition, Wrath of Cortex is not an objectively bad game. You only need to look at the glowing testimonials from people who had never played a Crash Bandicoot game before to realise that. But put it this way, it's not going to receive a remake anytime soon, is it? While groundbreaking hybrid platformers like Ratchet & Clank and Sly Cooper were still a year away, Jak and Daxter showed what was possible with the new hardware in 2001 when given enough resources and a full development cycle. Rather, Cortex is just an inferior rehash of a game that came out 3 years before it. Still, at least it came on one of those sweet blue discs, right?